There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
Hey Out Louders, it's Mia, popping into your ears on a Monday. It's a public holiday in a lot of states around Australia, so instead of a regular episode, today we're going to give you a little treat. If you've ever wondered what Mamamia subscribers get, they get lots of things, including free membership to our Move fitness app, extra episodes of No Filter, and of course 2 extra episodes of Out Loud every week. Today we're going to share one of those episodes with you. It's a conversation that Jessie, me and Em Vernem had earlier this year about intuition. It was hugely popular. Lots of people have wanted to talk to us about this, and it sparked a lot of conversations among the Out Louders. Have a listen.
Hello, we are very excited to be in your ears, and we have a special, I would say guest, but you're more than a guest. That's really underplaying you. You don't leave. You're here with Mia and Jessie, but also
Em Vernem, I'm here filling in for Holly today.
Oh, we are very excited. I listened to a great podcast recently about intuition, and I've been desperate to speak to you both about it. It was on Full Story, and it was all about the science behind your sense of intuition. And the host interviewed a cognitive neuroscientist called Joel Pearson. He gave some rules as to when to trust your gut and when not to. And he began with this story about this guy who was climbing Everest. And he was known as having like an iron stomach, like he'd never get sick. And he was just like, he did these things all the time. He was climbing Everest, and this was years and years ago before everyone did it. He started to feel really, really sick.
And he started to have doubts about pushing to the summit, that it was perhaps too windy, they were too tired, and these different things. And as they inched their way closer and closer to that point of no return, when the wind was howling up the mountain, he just got this feeling. It became stronger and stronger until he said, no, this is not right. We're not going to do it. And he called. He said, no, I'm going to turn around and make my way back to the camp. He convinced 2 of the others to come back with him, but then another 2 said, no, don't be silly. We're going to go to the summit. We're going to make this thing. So the team split, and 2 of the individuals kept going, and the rest turned around and started back climbing down the mountain. And then I think about 2 hours later, they were still climbing down, and they heard noise, and they looked up, and those 2 climbers came hurtling down and just missed them, almost took John out as they were sort of down climbing. So they'd fallen from the top, and they unfortunately lost their lives.
The point that Pearson is making is that all intuition is an unconscious understanding and gathering of information in our environment that doesn't seem rational, right? So, for example, he was saying you walk into a cafe, and I don't know if you've ever had this, you walk into a cafe and you go, no, I don't want to get my coffee from here. And then you go somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, you might even not have... Vibes are off. Mm-hmm. And he said, you might not even have an answer. But what you've done is you've smelt the smell of the coffee, you've seen the fingers of the barista, you've heard the sounds in the kitchen, you've picked up on an energy.
So it's like a subconscious thing.
Completely, exactly. And so it's something that you couldn't necessarily explain, but if you're able to tune into your gut, and he says that the research suggests some people are way better at this than others, it's not an equal thing. But if you are, it can give you a lot of input, a lot of information about decisions to make. Apparently women are better than men as well.
This is very true. I've often thought about something I learned that said exactly what you've said, Jessie, which is sometimes people are like, oh, trust your gut or gut instincts. It's not just woo-woo. It's actually the accumulated wisdom of your whole life up until that point.
Yeah.
And Malcolm Gladwell talks about something called thin slicing, which is when you make a very snap decision about something that might seem impulsive but is actually a very quick, like a snapshot of the whole context of everything you know and can see. And
it's wisdom accumulated. So people might say, oh, Mia has great intuition when it comes to editorial sense. That's not woo-woo. That's a career that has compiled a lot of information. You might even not be able to explain your working out, but what you're doing is going, I know this works, I know this doesn't work. So he says that your intuition as well, you've got to have been doing something for a while in order to have any real grasp on it.
But you know how sometimes we say to kids when we're talking about possible predators or situations, if something just feels wrong, if you've got a funny feeling in your tummy about a person or about a situation, listen to it. Do kids have that? They don't necessarily have a lot of life experience. So what does that mean?
There's a few things going on there. The first is that he would say socially there's a lot of cues that we pick up on, which is that the person might be speaking to you in a way you're not used to being spoken to, or they're trying to get you to come with them, or So
it does tap into some wisdom that...
Yeah, like reptilian almost. That's kind of like, there's some part of my brain that's my spidey senses are going off here.
Do you have spidey senses, Em?
I don't think I do. I have always been a bit of a skeptic when it came to people talking about their intuition, just because I've had people in my life who have been like, oh my God, I feel like my car's going to crash, or I'm going to get into a car crash. And I'm like, that is too much. Like, that's not an intuition, I don't think. But I did have a big experience when I was 18, so 10 years ago. That's kind of stuck with me. I was in London by myself and I was at a cinema. It was around 10 p.m. when the movie ended, and I had to walk back from the cinema back to the house that I was staying in. It was really dark. It was raining as well. And I just felt like someone was following me.
Yep.
And every time I turned around, no one was there. And I turned around probably 3 or 4 times. But I was also walking parallel to a bridge where people could kind of duck in and out of the bridge if they were really following me. So it was easy to hide. And I just thought I felt so stupid because I just kept turning around. I went around a corner and I just waited. And then I couldn't hear anyone, so I went back into the street. And the minute I turned back into the street, I was face to face with this man.
Oh, wow.
Who was behind me the whole time. Well, he was actually much taller, so I was literally looking into his chest. And he didn't move. He was just standing there, my nose could touch his chest basically. And I screamed and I ran into a pub, and I was just to the bartender, I was like, I'm staying here until that man leaves where I think it's safe.
So is that
that is definitely intuition, I think.
What's the difference? So intuition makes something sound kind of woo-woo, as if you can see the future, right? But gut instinct,
I think
to me,
gut,
feels more tangible.
Yeah.
I think they're both right, because I think everyone knows the experience of standing in a room and let's say I'm facing you both. The experience of knowing someone else has walked into the room but you haven't turned around to see them. There's just an energy sometimes, and it could be that you're unconsciously you've heard a sound, you've smelt something. It could be something.
You just feel the energy in the room change.
Or other people's reactions.
Exactly. So some part of your brain had picked up that you weren't safe and that it wasn't a safe situation, but also that there was someone else there. And it's like a survival instinct, I suppose, and in a lot of ways where we often ignore that, or we think that we're being silly or over the top.
I have 2 questions about this, and maybe they discussed it on this podcast. The first is the effect of anxiety, and the second is the effect of alcohol or drugs.
Yes. So they did talk about both of those things. The anxiety thing, this has been my biggest question, because I wake up every day with the sense that something bad's going to happen. I wrote a whole book about it. It's I will go to bed and I'll go, I've got that feeling my dad's going to die. I've got it. You just get that.
Yeah.
Or I'll think, oh, something good's happened in my life. I think something bad's going to and it's almost a superstitious anxiety thing that you've lived with forever. It doesn't matter that the bad thing never happens. It's just kind of always there. And he said that you need to have the self-awareness that you're feeling anxious, because it will completely interrupt and kind of set you on the wrong path.
Yes, because I've had that a lot.
Yeah.
When I was really scared of flying, you read those things about after plane crashes and someone will go, I just had a feeling that I shouldn't get on that plane, and lo and behold, it fell out of the sky. And so the problem is that every flight I would feel that. And so anxiety really affected my ability to trust my instincts in every sense, because they were always telling me that every situation was dangerous and that the worst possible thing was going to happen every single time. So I did completely lose faith in my gut instinct.
And how do you undo that? Because the thing about anxiety is that you're completely convinced, and then we do have this science of gut, science of instinct stuff that's follow it, trust it. don't be talked out of it. But then you actually got some help about flying, didn't you?
I did, but also I had medication to treat my anxiety.
And I guess exposure therapy.
And it
the more you
worked.
get on a plane and it doesn't crash.
Yes and no. A couple of things helped. What's hard to explain about when you're scared of flying is that it's not that you're scared the plane is going to crash. You know it's going to crash, like it's almost already crashed, and you're in a state of being in the middle of the crash at all times. Every time the plane would touch down, I would be like, oh,
Yeah.
I was so shocked.
Yeah.
The landing safely was the shock every single time.
And that's one of the things that, people have a fear of flying. They're about to get on the plane and they're having that strong emotional response. They're often going to confuse that with something like intuition or premonition. I'm feeling this because something's going to happen to the plane. And it's very tempting, right? I've had bouts with anxiety, and the emotional feelings can be very strong. And you start to think, it's so strong, it must be there for a good reason. And that reason must be something to do with things out in the world, not because of me. So that emotional thinking, that stress, anxiety is one I think people will confuse.
I'm very porous to energy. I'm terrible at being around people who are on drugs. When I'm around people who are, it's like I catch it.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
So I can't even go, like big events, big parties where there's lots of drugs, I can't even go near them because I feel like I'm on the drugs.
Do you feel
in a bad
like,
way.
Because of that skill to a certain extent, do you feel like you have good social intuition in terms of…
No, I've got the worst in the world.
Really?
I'm the worst judge of character in the world, like the worst.
How about you, Em? Do you think that
So
you have
I'm like a golden retriever.
there are some people who say, I can tell in an instant whether someone's good or bad. Like,
can
what do
never
you
tell.
reckon?
Yeah, I can tell. First
Can you?
15 seconds I can tell if
What can
someone's
you
a good
tell
person.
about someone?
It's their energy. Like, I don't know how to explain it. And I know I said I'm a skeptic, but it's that. And it's also the anxiety I get when I'm talking to them. Because
So how your body reacts.
Yeah, because I do think actually anxiety does help my intuition. Like that whole walk from the cinema back home, I was anxious. It wasn't like I was like, oh yeah, someone's probably following me.
Because I was going to say, I feel like that every time I go anywhere.
And I think the reason that I feel like I can switch and say it wasn't anxiety, it was intuition, was because I was proved right.
Yeah.
Whereas if there wasn't a man there, I would have probably just told the story as I just had this really anxious moment.
Have you had other times when you've gone and you've gone, oh, looking around and I feel like there's someone following me and there never was?
I get it sometimes with dating, like especially going on first dates.
In what way?
In a way where I think I'm in a dangerous situation and I'm actually not, just because I'm meeting someone for the first time and I don't know who they are. And that's just more of like, I'd rather be safe than sorry.
That's also your reptilian brain protecting you, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's also just like a single woman who's alone with a man.
Yeah,
so I
exactly.
think that's just like what
You've
all
been-
women would feel like.
Of course.
Yeah.
I feel the social thing very much. Like I think I'm very sensitive to walking into a dynamic. Sometimes if there's people that I don't know or whatever, and being like, oh, there's tension in the air. Like,
What's going on?
Yeah, there's nothing said, but it's like I can feel that. I can see the body language. I can see this partner doing this and blah. Like that I can very much tell. But my mum has a story of intuition, which was that I think she was only maybe year 6 or year 7. It was summer holidays and she had a brother who was sick, but like what they thought was kind of like flu-y. They didn't really know what it was, but sick. He was 21. Something happened the night before and he'd gone to hospital. It seemed really over the top, right? She was in campsite and it was the summer holidays and she went into this toilet block and she was having a shower and she says that she had a voice in her ear, clear as anything, say, Terry's died. Terry's died. And she heard this voice and she went, that's weird. And then she heard over the PA system of the camp thing calling her parents to the reception. And they called them and they said, Terry, 21 years old, no sign that he was about to die, had died. And Mum has talked about it since because she's not woo-woo, but she's like, there were sensors there. She could remember something. She remembered months and months before a priest had looked at him. He had something called Addison's disease, which they know a lot more about now, but really weird symptoms like cravings of things. He'd lost a bit of weight, really strange things. But a priest looked at him and sort of mumbled, you have a very sick boy, like just had a sense that something was not okay with him. But every doctor had dismissed. So rationally, he was okay according to the medical professionals, but something in Mum's brain was going, something's happened to Terry. I just have this feeling.
Has she ever had it since?
No.
And it's not something she can do at will?
No. And she's lost other people, but it was like this overpowering intuition that was like, something has gone wrong here, and it was gnawing at her. Wow. But it's interesting that it presented as a voice, like as something.
And also, what could she have done about it? I mean, I guess she could have called him.
Yeah.
Yeah, did she talk about like how she like didn't say anything, and does she wish she did?
It was literally like she got that, and then it was, a minute later that it came over the thing, and that's not something that would happen to her all the time. And she's also, and this is interesting what you say, Em, she's not someone who's highly anxious. So I think she's probably able to tune in better to when that does spike.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you were terrified every time you walked home, if you would have tuned into that. But if you're kind of like, oh, this isn't how I normally feel. Hang on, why am I feeling like this? And then gave yourself
That's
the
so
space.
true, because I'm not usually an anxious person. Like, anxiety is not something I suffer from.
Yeah.
So when I do get anxious, I know there's a reason, and like a reason, like I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's crazy, because if I do get scared walking from home, I will like take another route or something.
Yeah,
like I
listen
do
to
have
it.
that like little feeling.
I once talked to a psychologist about this because like I think I am a little bit psychic, but I also, my anxiety makes me panic about everything and think that bad things are going to happen all the time. So I find it very hard to distinguish. And she was explaining to me that women in particular will dress rehearse tragedy and catastrophe.
Dress rehearse is such a crazy word.
So that we feel like we're better prepared.
Yeah.
And that's just why women are often more interested in talking about hypothetical situations, and men, I'm generalizing, but men will just shut down. Whereas the reason that, and I remember learning this in the early days of Mamamia, where women would submit first-person stories, which they still do, but I was the one that was reading them all, and there was this woman who had told this story about her child who had drowned in their family pool. I felt compelled to share this story with Jason, and he physically was trying to hold my words at bay, and he was like, don't tell me this, don't tell me this. And I said, why not? He goes, because there's nothing I can do about it. So he can't fix it, right? But I needed to tell him, because to me, and this is why women will often share terrible stories, because we're trying to learn lessons from them and prepare our tribe to prevent it happening again and to protect them.
I've been having this chat recently with people, because you'll be told, you get told, you know your baby best. So if you think there's anything wrong with your baby, go with your gut, which is 9 times out of 10 good advice.
Unless you've got health anxiety.
But for 1 in 10 who are anxious, don't tell them that, because they will feel postpartum anxiety. I think is a lot of, I feel like there's something wrong with my baby.
Yes.
And so I'm going to keep going until I find out what it is.
Like I would imagine dropping my baby or like all these terrible things happening. And I remember speaking to a psychologist at the time and saying, I'm tortured by like imagining that I'm finding my baby dead or whatever. And that's when I learned about the dress rehearsing tragedy thing, that it's like you're trying to protect yourself from it.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's also more than just protection, but I think that's also why so many women are interested in true crime, because it's not only about the dress rehearsing, but it also validates the fears we already have.
Yeah.
And hearing that those stories are true makes us be like, okay, we're not going crazy. Like there's a reason why we're putting in all these measures to protect ourselves.
And then I wonder if that then informs the intuition, right? Because if you're talking about the thin slicing, it's like I'm drawing on all the information I have. I have been swimming in a swamp of true crime for years and years. So it's all I can see. But the other thing he said actually was about addiction, anything addictive, right? So gambling and phone use. He said male gamblers will often say they have an intuition and they don't. Like that's wrong. If you think you have
addiction,
that's just
like
an addiction.
I'm going to win.
Yes.
I'm going to win. I'm going to win.
Do they actually say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in all the research, they would say when it comes to a bet, like I'm really lucky or whatever, and they're not. It's just the way that
they're just betting so much money that they're probably just making.
Or the sense that you go, you'll sometimes like look at your phone or whatever, and you'll be like, I reckon if I pick that up, there'll be something interesting on it. It's like it's not. You're just addicted to your phone.
But you know how you were talking before about the Mount Everest guy. I know he wouldn't be drunk on Mount Everest because that would be a very poor thing to do. But what do you do about the fact that alcohol, and that's why a lot of people take it, is to loosen their inhibitions? But aren't your inhibitions also protective in a way? So don't you also reduce your connection with your gut instinct?
Yeah, you absolutely would. And it's probably why you're so much worse at assessing risk, right? It's why you get behind a car after having drinks or whatever. And it's like, this is by all accounts a terrible idea.
That's why I decided I had to stop drinking on dates.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, my instincts aren't very good anyway, but it would blunt any instincts that I had that you just spoke about. And that's kind of the point of it, right?
Yeah.
It's to make you less inhibited.
And whenever you drink on dates, you always drink way because you're competing with like a man. You're trying to meet their level because you're both drinking the same amount. And if you really like them, you want to get more drinks because you want to hang out more. And then I always realize that I drink way more on dates than I usually do with like my girlfriends.
That's so true because every time they get up or you're sitting there, it's like, oh, another one. And then you're like, I've had 4 and I can't see.
Yeah.
On a date, have you ever had an instinct or you've been in a car or just something where you've just gone, oh, I need to get out of here?
Oh, there's been a few dates where I've gotten a weird feeling just about how, you know, when you can just see in someone's eyes that like whatever you're telling them, they're kind of analyzing it and you can tell that they're going to do something really weird. So I've always been able to get myself out of those situations. I always meet in a public place for a first date, which I tell everyone, and I never let them see where I live or drive me home or anything like that. Those are my like rules for first dates. But it's so weird because even like something can go wrong on the second date or the third date or the fifth date. So after that, I've always just had to trust my instinct.
Yeah, and go with it.
I also
and that's
think
never been wrong.
kids have terrible instincts. Like that's the whole point, right? That the way the human brain develops, your instincts and your concept of consequence isn't developed until for men, it's in their early 20s sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when I think about the risks that I took as a teenager, holy moly.
Well, your instincts really should get better as you get older, right? Because you've just got more and more wisdom.
You've got more accumulated wisdom. Outlouders, what do you think about intuition? Have you got stories that you'd like to share? You can do that in the Facebook group or on Instagram. And if you want to hear more of us, if that just wasn't enough, you could give us a little treat. Either leave us a review wherever you're listening to your podcasts, or subscribe to Mamamia. We'll leave a link to do that in the show notes as well. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll be back in your ears as normal for the rest of the week. Bye.